Hello, Internet. Welcome to PhiloMag. So today we'll talk about one thing: perfection. And we all wish to be just like me, the perfect human being. Nope, too much? Okay. So there are thousands of articles and books and those weird meme thingies that happen to tell you 640 ways to be a better person and be more compassionate, become an entrepreneur, find a hobby. But can us humans ever be perfect? Can anything ever be perfect? That is the question. We Homo sapiens came up with the word perfect and its language equivalents a long time ago and maintained it for many, many millennia. Sometimes we use perfect as a word to describe something and what is outstandingly amazing. Blink, your perfect sword size blows my mind. But even if they're amazing, they're never perfect. If you've never been to this universe, welcome. Here, literally everything is the definition of imperfect. Our own spherical Earth isn't even a perfect sphere. The sun has a bunch of dark spots over it. Seriously, universe, you had one job. But before we even try to end up comprehending how to get perfect, we need to ask, what is perfect? We focus so much on wanting perfection that we don't even know exactly how to get to perfect or even what perfect is. Similar to most of our words, our semantics never concretely define the abstract concept of perfection. Sure, maybe let's say in school, perfect is 100%, which is something you'll never get, or at least the highest grade possible. For example, if you have a teacher willing to give you extra credit, then maybe perfect is 110%. Conversely, if you have a less forgiving teacher, then maybe perfect is just 95. But then you move on to things that their perfection cannot be determined based on the numbers. The spread, for example, isn't really just arithmetic. Otherwise, I would just loaf around at the numbers. What you may call perfect for bread, maybe an evenly cooked texture, may not be perfect for somebody else. A bread loaf with no holes. Or if we were trying to create a perfect human, and one may perceive a perfect human to not be susceptible to bad disease, these disorders or cancers. But when do we consider a disease to be bad, or for a human to have omniscient knowledge? But that begs the question: then what is even omniscient, and can we humans contain such knowledge? Point is, what even is perfect? It is a sort of indeterminable query in itself. Even the definition for perfect in Google says having all the required or desirable or elements, qualities, or characteristics as good as it is possible to be. The very definition in Google notes that it is based on the desirable elements, so it is based on what the person wants or wishes. Thus making it so difficult to find what is perfect and what isn't is simply just because perfect it is based entirely on a subjective base. What you consider perfect isn't exactly perfect to somebody else. And so when it comes to the etymology of perfect, the word came from the Latin perfectio, meaning finished. Again, however, that begs the same question, but with a different word. What is finished? Therefore, except on a mathematical basis such as greater circles, most perfect is practically inconceivable. After all, we are all individual beings and want different desires. However, let's just assume this. Let's assume that perfect in every context possible is conceivable and is not based on perception. If we do this, then we reach the question that we had at the start of the video. How do we get to perfect? When it came to the Greek philosopher Aristotle, he believed in the notion of living things and non-living things. Things where non-living things lack motion without an external force, whereas living things can move. Living things change in a way a- that happens to lead to an end goal known as telos. Those- The, the motion of living things may very well be the realization of the telos, and as such, the living being acts to reach perfection. In a mathematical basis, the reach for perfection is well impossible. Yes, as we explained before, mathematical perfection is in some cases conceivable and even possible through mathematical calculations, but it's impossible in the real world. When we discuss physics, making a perfect circle is physically impossible because it's impossible to measure a perfect circle. This is because you have to measure the circle's curvature in all infinite places on the circle to infinite accuracy and precision. And well, because infinitely isn't exactly possible with today's tools, we would have to reach some imperfections to even measure any real object. Back to mathematics, such as possible, but when applied to our modern understanding of the laws of physics in the real world, it all falls apart. It's kind of like a negative exponential graph. The exponential line in the graph lowers down to the x-axis is nearly as quickly as possible, while getting to a point where no matter how what the slope is, the line is more than 99.999% of its original distance closer to the x-axis. Yet, for infinity, the line never ever reaches the x-axis. No matter how far you go down on that line, it really just gets even closer and closer to the x-axis, but it never reaches the y-axis. As such, the fight for perfection is a fight infinitely lost, just like the fight for the line to reach the x-axis. Hypothetically, you can construct something in which happens to contain perfect circles, such as creating a square and then saying that there's a perfect circle inside there. However, this proves useless since you can't even sense the perfect circle. Plus, once you end up opening the square, you find that the circles there aren't even perfect, or that there aren't even any circles at all. However, when it comes to black holes, their perfection is questionable, specifically in their event horizon. Many scientists hypothesize that the event horizon of a black hole, or which is the area before a black hole that surrounds the celestial object, may very well form a perfect circle or a perfect sphere. However, we have yet to gather enough evidence to make the hypothesis into a theory. On a smaller scale, we have electrons. The near perfect roundness of electrons are unbelievable, as they're practically perfect spheres. Keyword practically. Even though these electrons and other particles may very well fall short of the perfect roundness goal with their imperfections. Humans, meanwhile, try to do the same by creating the quartz gyroscopic rotors for NASA's Gravity Probe Mobius spacecraft. They are little less than 3/10 millionths of an inch from perfection. As such, they're imperfect, just like everything else that we're surrounded by. And that is just with circles and spheres. Imagine the possibility of perfection with more complex things, such as the bread we mentioned earlier, or with humans. That imagination, however, is just exactly what Greek philosophers such as Plato tackled. Plato happened to believe that what is considered to be perfect, it isn't exactly based is on the viewer's perception that beauty is not art in just the beholder. This comes from Plato's theory of forms. which states that we, of course, live in the material world. However, beyond the material world, there comes an immaterial realm of ideal forms in which we cannot access except through imagination. This immaterial realm has these perfect, ideal forms of everything, be it concrete, non-living things such as laptops, living beings such as orangutans, or even abstract concepts such as love. Virtually everything in which the humans can comprehend. This isn't limited to just good things either. Fear, for example, can also be manifested into a perfect form in the immaterial realm. However, these ideal forms can be manifested perfectly in the material realm. All we can do is just imitate it and echo their existence. There may be a perfect human out there, even a perfect person of every gender, age, and ethnicity. But those perfect humans hasn't, don't, and will never exist in our realm of existence. That is Plato's theory of ideal forms. The problem with that is that we and nothing around us is perfect. What we may think of to be perfect in the immaterial realm of existence hence may be imperfect to somebody else. After all, Greco-Romans hence happen to been to believe that the perfect human and to really be just like them, a person with ethnicity just like them, with a specific facial design, in a specific hair type, etc., etc. Which allowed sculptures and paintings such as Venus de Milo to be created. But who were they to end up deciding that the model they made was even the perfect human? How did they get to that as perfection? Which brings us back full circle to the question, what is perfect? Thank you everybody who decided to watch this video. This is the first video in part of a new series. It's in a new chapter of my life on YouTube. It would be great if all of you who saw this video like, commented, and subscribed. New videos will be uploaded every Sunday. Make sure to check out my Google Plus and my website. Links in the description. Have a nice day. Or so they say, have a perfect day.